Hi, all of you wonderful and loving caregivers, and welcome to Managing Mental Health, or MMH for short. I'm Renee. We're here to provide tools and information to help you cope with the day-to-day struggles so many of us face as caregivers. Our team of licensed caregivers provides new videos on a weekly basis touching on age-related illnesses such as Alzheimer's and dementia, mental illness as well as mental disorders, and also traumatic brain injury, which is known as a TBI. And typically that's going to result in some type of permanent brain damage depending on the degree, really depends on the injury. We are going to try to answer as many questions as we can today. We get tons of questions on our website every week, so let's go ahead and jump in. But first, please remember that we are not doctors or clinicians, so always check with your doctor to make sure the tips and advice we're giving are right for the person you're helping out and caring for. We all do have tremendous experience in caregiving. I took care of my mother through her Alzheimer's and dementia. She passed in 2010. For years, if not decades, I've taken care of both of my sisters. One is severely mentally ill, and the other one is was in a really tragic plane accident 40 years ago and has terrible brain damage. And she lives with me even today. She'll live with me until she passes, most likely. So let's go ahead, and we have lots of experience to bring you. Let's go ahead and jump into some of our questions today. And sometimes we get a lot of repeat questions, and so we will, if we get questions 4 or 5 times every week, then we're going to go ahead and try to address that question at least on a weekly basis. One of the most common questions I get, and it was a question I certainly had when my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, is what is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? And if I could put it really, really simply, Alzheimer's, and I say this with the utmost of respect, Alzheimer's is a progressive disease. It's going to get worse. It most likely will not get better. Now, there are some new drugs on the market which could help it get better, but typically speaking, Alzheimer's is a progressive disease, meaning it will continue and it will get worse over time. Dementia, and I mean, you can look this up online and you can see different definitions for it. The frustration was huge for me because I'd ask, 5 different doctors and I'd get 5 different answers. But the really basic core answer is dementia is a consequence of something. It's either a consequence of Alzheimer's or a consequence of some type of injury. There are many different types of dementia. It is referred to in the single form, so someone has a dementia. My sister, for example, who was in the plane accident, has really severe brain damage. So her brain was damaged. That immediately created dementia in her. And now she's in her late 60s, and so she's also getting age-related dementia on top of that. So hopefully that's helpful. Alzheimer's is a progressive disease. Dementia is generally accepted as a consequence of an illness or an accident. There can be some variations to that, but that's just kind of a basic way to look at it. Okay, so I hope that helps. And I'm sorry, that question came from Karen in El Cajon. Okay, moving to our next question. This comes from Stacy in San Diego. It says, my mother keeps telling me that she got lost on her way home. Could this be a sign of Alzheimer's and dementia? Some of the early warning signs are questionable as I look them up online. Okay, my answer to your question is yes, absolutely. If your loved one is going to the same places over and over and they're getting lost, they're gone for an unusual amount of time, then that's probably a pretty good chance that they have Alzheimer's coming on. The very first thing you need to do, and don't feel badly about this, but call your doctor, make an appointment. I let my doctor know, my mother's doctor know ahead of time that I suspected that she had either Alzheimer's or dementia. I didn't know the difference back then. And ask if he could test her for that, because I always want to be respectful with my family members that I'm caring for. I mean, you want to be respectful with everybody. You don't want to hurt their feelings. You don't want them to ever feel degraded or belittled because of their situation. So I called ahead when I booked her appointment and said, I kind of think my mom might have something going on, and can you test her when we come in? And so I was surprised. The test was super simple. My mom was a very smart woman, and she was still functioning on her own. She still lived by herself. Granted, I was going over there an awful lot. I was taking care of her medications, taking care of some of her finances and so forth. And what the doctor said, and I was just absolutely shocked, you guys, the test was so extremely simple. He said, what year is it? She got that one right. Then he said, who's the president? She got that one right. And then he asked her a couple really kind of mundane questions. And then the stumper of all for her is he gave her a pencil and a piece of paper. And he said, draw me an analog clock. And she just looked blank. I was absolutely stunned to watch her going through this. She looked utterly blank. And so he said, well, let me help you. And he drew a circle. And she still looked blank. So then he drew the 12, the 3, the 6, and the 9. And he said, can you populate the rest of that clock for me? And she strained and she struggled and she couldn't. She couldn't even put the pencil on the paper to do it. And I was absolutely shocked. Well, some of the other basic questions that he'd ask her, she answered incorrectly. And he said, which really surprised me, he said right in front of her, he said, I do believe that you have onset Alzheimer's. And I was absolutely stunned by that. But we'd had a couple financial situations at the bank. You know, she'd call me and say, oh, you know, I won $20 million and all I have to do is pay a $2,000 processing fee, and they're going to bring TV cameras and this and that. And I thought, well, that is just such a scam. And I can't get my head around people who take advantage of those who are in my mom's situation. My mom actually passed in 2010, but still, these people are out there. They're all over the place, unfortunately. So you have to protect your loved one against this kind of thing. And so I walked out of the room at the doctor's office and I said, you know, we've had some other concerns in regard to my mom's ability to handle her finances and so forth. Can you provide me with a letter? He said, absolutely, wait here. He went in, and you guys do, all of you caregivers, and I get that you're balancing so many things in your life. You're balancing, in some cases, children or a spouse, other family members, a career, running your household. There's just a lot to balance. So if you can do something quickly and efficiently, it is always helpful. And this do right in that moment. If your loved one is in fact diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia, you get that letter from that doctor right then. It's like 3 sentences, and it says, you ask the doctor to put on their letterhead, and it might say, you know, so-and-so is no longer able to manage their own financial affairs, and after a thorough examination, et cetera, et cetera. When you get that letter, and let me really stress this, you guys, when you get that letter, immediately take it and make copies. So again, the letter's going to be on the medical facility's letterhead, signed by the attending physician. Then you're going to make tons of copies because you need to give one to the bank. Any financial institution your loved one deals with, you need to give them a copy of that letter. So make sure you make lots of copies and keep extra copies as well. So hopefully that's helpful. Also, one of the things that I noticed as I went to my mom's house, just as I was going over there, as her illness progressed, I'd go once a week, then I'd go twice a week, then ultimately I was there every single day, and finally I moved her in with me. I didn't want to force the issue, but she felt like she was ready to move in with me, and so it worked out well for us. I would go to her house, and I would see the gardener. Now again, I'm there pretty much every day. And the gardener charges her $40, and he's going to trim her trees and tells her how, the HOA will fine you this huge fine, which wasn't true at all. Again, somebody taking advantage. And so I looked in her checkbook and I noticed that she paid the gardener $40 every 2 days, sometimes every day. And so we immediately terminated that gardener, and my mom was really quite gracious about letting me help her with her finances. One of the things you can do when you go to the bank and you show them that letter, again, you want your family members to maintain their dignity, their self-respect, and some sense of independence. So I know nowadays most of us are going to pay everything electronically, but for my mom, she never got to that point, and she died very young. She was only 75 when she passed in 2010. And I wanted to again respect her need for independence, and honestly kind of her pride. Everybody takes pride in taking care of themselves and so forth. So I went to the bank and I got what are called an in trust for account. And so her account had her name on it, and it also had my name on it. So it said my name and then ITF, Interest For. And Interest For was not spelled out on her check, so you guys know. It just said ITF, and then it was her name below it. Now, I could sign the check without her, but I always would sit down with her and doing it kind of the old-fashioned way, which is how she wanted to do it. I'd sit down with her and help her pay her bills, and she'd sign the checks, and then I'd take them and mail them and put them in her check register, that kind of thing. So you want to watch the community. I always thought when my mom bought a house in a senior living community that it would be wonderful. But what I didn't realize at the time is it also makes them easy victims. They're easy prey. So you want to, again, be careful, watch the community they're in, look at their checkbook. If they're writing inexplicable checks to people, that's a huge sign. Getting lost on their way home and a short distance is a huge sign. One time it took my mom 4 hours to get home from a 10-minute drive. And I just told her, I said, you know, Mom, are you not comfortable driving anymore? And she said, I don't know if I should drive or not. And you guys, if this works for you guys, you know, God bless you. I was so nervous and so tense when I had to take my mom's driver's license and car keys away from her. Did not want to do that. You know, she's still my mom, and that changing of the roles can be very awkward feeling in the beginning. So after the one episode where she'd been lost for 4 hours roughly, because I'd called and I'd called and I'd called, and she didn't use a cell phone, and so finally when I did get a hold of her, and I was actually at her house when she arrived home, and we sat and we talked about it for a while. I said, do you think you should maybe not drive anymore? And I was so shocked, you guys, and hopefully it'll be this easy for you. She got real still. She folded her hands. She kind of bent her head down, and then she just stood up and she walked away. And I thought, you know, is she going to be mad at me? Because a lot of folks get real upset when you want to take their driver's license. And I thought, is she going to be mad at me? Is this going to be, you know, have a horrible outcome to it? And she went into her bedroom. And she was gone for maybe 5 minutes, and I just sat at her dining room table, you know, waiting patiently for her. And she came back and she handed me her car keys, and then she sat down and she opened her wallet and she took her driver's license out and she handed me her driver's license. It was simply that easy because she was really frightened, and naturally I assured her that I would take her wherever she needed to go. So hopefully for you guys it'll be super simple like that. So let me look at my notes. And also you can talk to the community if she lives in a managed community, whether it's a house. My mom had a house, but again, it was in a senior community, so there was an exercise facility there and a pool and all the amenities, and they had a management center there. And I talked to them about the gardener and said, you know, this is what's happening, and she's also getting this kind of mail and so on and so forth, and, you know, is there anything you guys can do to kind of keep an eye on them? And so they agreed to do that. It also helps the other neighbors a bit. Okay, so moving on to our next question. This one is coming from Sue in Irvine. It says, what can I do to prevent my dad from wandering off? He goes outside when I'm in the shower or in another room. Do you have any suggestions? I have lots of suggestions, and I have great news because we have a new product coming out. Keeping your family safe within your own home is really critical. So this is once they've moved in with you. And we're developing a product called Loving Boundaries, and I'll tell you guys about it in the next probably 30 days. That product will be ready to be released, and it really helps develop very loving, gentle boundaries that guide your loved one as to, you know, where's your bedroom, where's your bathroom, where's your closet, you know, please wait here, don't go over there, don't go up the stairs, don't go down the stairs, etc. And we have this unbelievably excellent method of presenting this to our loved ones. Because I had this issue with my mother. I definitely have this issue with my sister and have for years. So I'm excited that we're going to have Loving Boundaries that will be introduced again, hopefully sometime this month. And I'll explain how that works to you guys next time. In the meantime, I would say put a lock on, not a chain lock, because my mom was bright. She could figure out the chain lock. My sister could figure out a chain lock. So I would put notes on the door. Please don't open the door. The problem with those is they'd peel the notes off and take them with them for whatever reason, I don't know. I finally got, I made a note of this so I could remember what it's called, a swinging door flap. You can get the bolt that just kind of slides back and forth. I didn't find that extremely successful because my mom was bright. She'd just go over there and slide it open. And she was average height, maybe a little bit taller. So I had to be careful where I put things. So I got the swinging door flap, which is, you can go to any hardware store and you can ask for it. And it just, you have to jiggle one side and it flaps over. It's super simple to use. But what you want to do is you want to put it way up high at the top of the door. And that way they can't get it open, because one of the things that happens when somebody has Alzheimer's and dementia is they can't chain together a lot of thoughts. They can't solve problems. Cooking, excuse me, is one of the things that becomes very difficult, because if you, for any of you guys who cook, all you caregivers, and most of you probably do cook, I mean, timing's involved. What do you cook first? What do you cook second? Which pan do you use? Is it going in the oven or the microwave, etc.? So there's a lot to think about. When my mother would go to the front door, after I put the swinging door flap on it, she'd pull and the door wouldn't open. Now, she eventually could look up and figure out that there was a lock up there that she couldn't get unlocked. But for her to get out, she would have to, one, recognize the door is locked. Two, understand she couldn't reach that lock. Three, go somewhere in the house and find a step stool to stand on. Four, keep all that intact mentally, take that step stool back to the door, climb up on it, unlock it. It's just too many steps. She's not going to do it. So as an interim solution, actually I think this is an excellent solution all the time. It'll go nicely with our Loving Boundaries package as soon as we get that introduced. So you get the swinging door flap and you put it up high. Again, the sliding bolt and the chain lock is, in my opinion, and based on my experience, because I tried all of them, is those two kinds of locks are just way too easy for your loved one to get out of. Okay, so let's see. Our next question comes from, this comes from Anonymous. It says, my brother's 14 and he walks around the house talking to himself all the time as though he's talking to another person. My mom and I think there's something really wrong with him. We think he's mentally ill, but we don't know what to do. The very first thing I'm going to tell you guys to do, and this is critical, this is life-changing if you do it soon enough, is you go to the doctor with him and you get a diagnosis. Diagnosing mental illnesses or mental disorders, and there are over 400 different mental illnesses and disorders that worldwide is accepted as true and accurate. My oldest sister is paranoid schizophrenic, she's bipolar, she has a panic disorder, and she has OCD. Unfortunately, we didn't get her diagnosed until she was in her, I'm going to guess, I'm pretty sure it was in her 50s, could have been late 40s, but I think it was in her 50s. And it was just horrible because her life had crumbled at that point. But the first thing you want to do is you don't want to be confrontational about it. You know, he's a minor, so that's huge. The fact that he's a minor, your mom can take him to the doctor and again call ahead of time and say, we suspect that, you know, my son has some type of mental disorder. We don't know what it is. Here are the symptoms, and then describe all of the symptoms very carefully to the physician, and take your brother in with your mom. I'd encourage you. You sound like a super responsible, helpful person. I would go with your mom and your brother when they go to the doctor. The important thing to understand about mental illness, it's not that same horrible taboo thing it used to be. Mental illness is physiologically driven. We don't make fun of people with heart disease or kidney disease or liver disease or cancer or anything else. So why do we call people who are mentally ill loons and crackers and a nut job? And I've heard all of these terms used in relation to my oldest sister, and it broke my heart every time. Broke her heart, embarrassed her. So just say, you know, if the diagnosis comes back that your brother does in fact have a mental illness or disorder, then underline the word illness. It's no different than any other illness. It's just attacking a different part of his body. So the quicker your brother can get diagnosed, the quicker he can get on the appropriate medications, the better off it's going to be. proper medications can be life-altering. If he is diagnosed with multiple disorders, that becomes very challenging. Again, you don't want to confront him. What I try to do with my sister, who again is schizophrenic, and then we layer paranoid on top of that, so she's technically paranoid schizophrenic, and she's bipolar, which gives her some serious mood swings, and she has a panic disorder, which means she's frightened easily, and when she's frightened about something, it becomes very, very extreme. And then she also has obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. So when you layer the OCD on top of the paranoid schizophrenia, that poor girl can go down the rabbit hole in a heartbeat. You don't want to argue with her. You don't want to tell her she's mentally ill while she's having an episode or a breakdown. You just want to say, my sister hears voices, so she has what are referred to as audible hallucinations. There are also visual hallucinations, which I understand are terribly scary, terribly scary. Hallucinations are never nice. People who have hallucinations are not hallucinating about some fabulous birthday party or some wonderful vacation. The hallucinations are typically very, very frightening for the person enduring that. And there's also psychotic hallucinations. My sisters are only audible, and so I will simply say, Joanne, are you hearing, is somebody talking to you right now? And she'll say yes, but you can't hear them. And I'll say, well, why don't we just try not to listen to them right now, okay? And you want to acknowledge it and then distract them and change the subject. At this point, it's such a blessing. I asked her one time not long ago, I said, do you still hear voices? And she said, yeah, but I know they're only in my head now. She's been through enough therapy and she's on the appropriate medications, and it took the doctor a long, long time to get her on the right medications. So again, I can't stress it enough. Go to the doctor, get the diagnosis, get the medication, and get her whatever type of therapy that doctor is recommending. And lastly on this topic for today, something I will share with you guys is if you feel uncomfortable with the doctor's diagnosis and recommendations, you and your family have absolutely every right to go to another doctor. I know you guys have all heard the phrase, get a second opinion. Get a second opinion, get a third opinion. I'd probably stop at 3. But if you don't feel comfortable with what that doctor is saying, go to another doctor. I know my sister at one point was on 6 different antipsychotic medications, and I just thought to myself, they are, forgive me for using this phrase, but I felt like they were just frying her brain. I felt like the medication they were giving her, and I've done a lot of reading on this topic, was actually causing brain damage. And so it can, some of the antipsychotic medications can, but being properly medicated is just life-altering for your loved one and for your entire family. So if you feel like the medication is excessive or you don't agree with it, go to another doctor. There's nothing wrong with it. If people should not be afraid of their doctors, they should not be afraid to speak their opinion. Obviously, always use respect when you're talking to them. But I just felt that was way too much medication. And in fact, when I took her to another doctor, he changed her medication. And what she would do is, she was on so much medication, she would stand up in the morning, at the time she was living with me, and she would sway. She would just sway back and forth and have this totally blank stare on her face. And it was because she was overly medicated. Now, different schizophrenia medications, and again, don't forget, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a clinician, I just have a lot of life experience with this topic. Different medications can have different physical effects on people. So continue going to a doctor. If you're not comfortable with the first one, go to a second one, okay? And God bless you. It's a tough journey. Remember, when you are talking to someone who is mentally ill, you don't want to be confrontational. You want to speak in a slow and calm voice. One of the things about schizophrenia is their thoughts can become very fragmented. So you can't say to my sister, you can't say, "Hi, Joanne, how are you doing?" and expect an immediate response. You have to say, "Hi, Joanne, how are you? You doing okay?" And then you pause and you wait and you let that thought process for her. Just, for maybe 5 seconds. And I know that 5 seconds doesn't sound long when you say 5 seconds, but in the course of conversation, 5 to 10 seconds is a really long time. But in that time, she will gather her thoughts and she'll say, I'm good, how are you? And so you just want to speak a little more slowly. Don't want to confront them. Don't want to argue. Don't want to accuse them of lying or making something up. When they do have delusions, you want to acknowledge it. Say, I understand you're hearing voices. That must be awful. By the way, can you just try not to listen to those voices for a while and we'll just go get lunch, okay? Something like that, just to kind of help them step away from that situation. Again, if your doctor diagnoses your loved one with multiple disorders, then you need to do some research, talk to that doctor, and find out what the stacking or layering of those multiple disorders will do, what the consequences are, and what the results are. So I hope that helps you. Oh, okay, that is probably all we have time for today. I hope this information has helped you guys. If you'd like to submit questions, please go to www.managingmentalhealth.com, click on Submit Question, and follow the link. While you're on our website, please become a member or a sponsoring member. Membership provides access to Let's Talk, Meet Me at the Kitchen Table, and Co-op Care. These are proprietary softwares that we have developed to match people up, not only just for communication and getting together and talking about situations that you're in. We match you with people close to you and also with people going through the same thing, same gender in many cases, same age bracket in many cases. Co-op Care allows for the sharing of caregiving should you and the people we introduce you to choose to do that. So again, those things come with the membership, and also crisis management, which is absolutely fabulous. And this stems from, people ask me a lot, they say, well, do you work? You've had so many, because at one point I had all three of my family members living with me and I was taking care of all of them. And my youngest son was still a minor and my oldest son was legally an adult, but not really grown up yet, right? And he too is still living at home at the time. And I have a consulting practice. It's a business consulting practice that I've had for over 30 years. So I was trying to balance and run all of this and take care of my family at the same time. And what I found, because I'd get to know my clients over the years, and they knew a little bit about my family and what my situation was, and they'd start to ask, and they'd say, well, what do you do? And what's next? And what should we expect? So I just very organically developed managing mental health out of my consulting practice, because we do a lot of disaster recovery projects and crisis management projects. And so I just started doing crisis management for families and individuals. If somebody had come into the hospital when my middle sister was injured 40 years ago, she was in a plane accident. If somebody had come in and said, let's create a roadmap of care, not only for your sister, but for your entire family, it would have changed our lives. The doctors didn't know if she was going to live or die. They didn't know how bad her brain damage would be. They didn't know how long she'd be comatose. They didn't know any of that. And that's fine. She had really good doctors, but they don't have a magic wand, so they don't know that. But after the fact, when she started coming out of the coma, and we'll talk about coming out of comas in another video, because it's not, people don't just wake up and go, oh, what day is it? That's not how it happens. But if somebody had sat down with my parents back then, and again, it's 40 years ago, and said, here's your current situation, and here are the potential situations that you may be facing. Here are the consequences of those situations. Here is the potential cost of those situations. Here's how much time you're going to have to put into it. Here's how much help you're going to have to put into it. Here are your alternatives should you choose outside care, should your loved one not get better, et cetera, et cetera. So there are so many questions, particularly when somebody is involved in an accident. So we came up with crisis management. We now provide consulting services and sit down and work very confidentially with families and help them create a roadmap as to where their family may be headed based on the situation they're facing. Illness, injury, some type of an accident, or a progressive illness as well. So hopefully that will help you guys. And when you're on the website, again, it's www.managingmentalhealth.com. We invite you to go there for additional information. And always feel free to call us, particularly if you feel like your family's in crisis. You can reach us at 888-929-9828. Again, that's 888-929-9828. You'll find that on the website. And we're always there for you guys. If you go to voicemail, one of our team members will call you back as quickly as possible. So again, I hope this has helped you guys. Until next time, continue living, loving, and caring. Bye-bye for now.